Yeah, I can't see the whole post. The whole comment starts. Here's a topic for your show.
Good morning, Geauga, Lake, Northeast Ohio, and the rest of the world. You've got Jonathan Broadbent here, your host of Voice of Geauga, and returning guest Mark Zetzer. Mark,
Hi.
welcome back onto the show. We're glad to have you back.
Thanks. Great to be here.
We have a different format, and this will be a little different experience than the last time you were on. And we are simultaneously, ladies and gentlemen, on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, and broadcasting on WINT Radio. If you'd like to join in the conversation, join us on social media. That's Facebook, Rumble, and YouTube. Post your comments, post your questions, and we will work to get answers for you. That's what Voice of Geauga is all about. I see people lining up and already starting to post some great comments on Facebook. Mark, one of the things that's happened since the last time you joined this program is that a few of the channels have really gotten active. When we first started the podcast, I found that there was a very robust Rumble audience with a lot of conversation taking place. But over the last few weeks, we have grown a very significant Facebook and YouTube audience with robust conversation that takes place. So, Mark, you and I ventured into a conversation about some posts that you've made on Facebook. And just prior to the show, we actually tried to pull up one of them. I'm a little bit stuck for the moment. If you're on Facebook like Mark and I are, you know that sometimes it can be difficult to track back and find information and posts from a few days ago for some strange reason. And I think it's the algorithm and the fact that I think Facebook wants us spending as much time as possible in there.
Auto scroll,
Oh my gosh,
never
yes.
stops. It's so annoying.
So Mark and I actually both spent some time just prior to the show rooting around in the cellars of Facebook, seeing if we can find that post. But let's begin with your comments about rejoining the show and taxation. Let's start things there because who isn't very concerned about the amount of taxes that we pay?
Well, the post was about taxes and the fact that we just had the great weekend of the 250th anniversary of our country. And the day after, July 5th, I saw the movie Young Washington and with my son. And I was looking at, it was a great movie, really good. I recommend it. But
Yeah.
it's, one of the things I like to look at with a historical movie is then I'll research it and say, well, how historically accurate is that movie? And I came upon a video about it, and it seemed to portray that it was fairly accurate. Obviously, they take creative license, but one of the key things is like what drove these people to pick a fight with the British Empire and to defy the British Empire. And what was this such a extreme grievance? And because you know what, they were only paying about 2.5% taxes, total taxes, and that was less than the British citizens in England. And I thought, my gosh, well, we're paying a lot more than that now.
Yeah.
Uh,
Way more than
20 to
2.5%.
30%, I believe, is the total tax burden of most Americans and corporations. And so anyway, the comment, and we can't find it, I apologize, but it was basically just that, like, why do we pay any taxes? Because this conversation came up, obviously, when we started gathering petitions to abolish the property tax bill, on the ballot, which we failed to do this for this November. But this started the conversation about why do we pay property taxes, but then why do we pay any tax? If President Trump was going to replace the federal income tax with tariffs, which is how the country was funded for most of its history, believe it or not, it was funded by, we're not taxing the citizens, we're taxing foreigners who want to sell in the United States, which is really brilliant and really how it should have been.
Yeah, that's how things worked prior to, was it 1913, I believe,
That
the
was the first income
imposition of the
tax.
first income tax. You know, I want to pause for a moment and make a comment about the level of taxation. And this can get complex. And I think most people by now have seen, and one of those memes are aware of the number of different taxes that we pay. And we talk a lot in Ohio about we are one of the most taxed states there is. The
Yes.
number of taxing authorities in the state of Ohio is very, very high. That means the number of agencies that are permitted to impose taxes on us. But actually, I take it one step further. Mark, I actually look at a lot of the fees and fines and penalties
Hmm.
and dues and all those sorts of things as simply another form of taxation. And if you lump all those together, the property tax, the sales tax, the inheritance tax, the income tax, the you name it, the
Vehicle registration fee.
yeah, as soon as you start adding those, the vehicle registration, and now we're starting to see, in addition to the fact that we are asked, understandably, to fund police, fire, EMS, first responders, but now we see a growing trend toward additional fees on top of what we're already paying for those services in the form of, and this is just one example, we're seeing flock cameras. So those flock cameras are the cameras that supposedly are tracking our vehicle movement and sending us a bill in the mail if we commit a vehicle infraction. And those are generating, from what I understand, and we can get into whether or not it's actually legitimate and legal to mail speeding tickets. That's another question entirely. But assuming some percentage of people receive it in the mail and send checks in, I make the argument that that is another form of taxation. We are using our money to fund police, fire, EMS, etc. And the same thing in schools, where we're asked to fund schools. About 60% on average of our property tax burden goes to pay schools. But then on top of it, we get lots of schools that impose extra fees and you have to pay for things like uniforms, band instruments, art supplies, bring your own supplies to school. So at what point do we make the argument? And for me, this is kind of a loaded question, as I've already determined my answer. At what point do we lump all that together and make the determination that, depending on your income, your level of taxation might be 50, 60, 90% or higher of your income?
Of course. Yeah. It's all kinds of fees. And I would also add, of course, that inflation, when they
Yep.
devalue the currency and more money is chasing the same amount of goods and the prices go up, that also is a tax. Inflation is a tax because
Yep.
they're spending and printing money far more than what they're taking in. They're taking in tax collections. So that creates inflation, and that is a tax. People think, oh, well, they're just printing the money. It's coming out of nowhere. No, you can't create money. All you can do is devalue the currency. And that also is a huge tax, and why I decided to run for Congress at least 3 times now I've run, because what has plagued me my whole life as a kid growing up in the 1970s, I've experienced inflation that has outstripped my ability to keep up with it by working very hard, and sometimes multiple jobs. So inflation, I think, is the most egregious tax. It's one that representatives don't vote on directly. Obviously, if they vote on spending that the government doesn't have money for, that's going to create inflation. And foreign wars, I would add to that just seem to go on decade after decade.
Yeah, those are great examples. And I think a lot of people miss that. And frankly, we should have more basic economics taught in K through 12. So people have a basic understanding from a young age of how money works, not just, balancing your checkbook, but also the creation of wealth, the creation of capital. That's unfortunately, you find, well, where do we begin in the conversation of shortcomings in today's K through 12 education environment? We have children out there, unfortunately, young adults who are entering the workforce who have no idea how currency works. as a starting point, as a basic fundamental building block, figuring out how to make change for a $20 bill, for instance. If you deem to use actual paper currency, which I suggest, I encourage use of local currency, of our paper currency, rather than processing fees associated with credit cards. But using that as a building block, getting a generation of young adults to understand that money isn't free. And if our US government is printing more money and adding it into the money supply, then we're devaluing the currency, which means that the cost of goods, the cost of buying the groceries that you want, will go up. It's a strange disconnect. And we saw it. It was a glaring example when we saw the Inflation Reduction Act. And I
Oh,
air
gosh.
quote that. I mean, government spending creates inflation. And that was a giant pile of government spending. But then they attached the completely backward, inside out and upside down moniker to the thing, calling it an Inflation Reduction Act, which is an outrage to anybody paying attention.
It is outrageous. Yes. Think about it. Before COVID, the federal budget was around 4 trillion, which is insane in itself. But by the end of COVID and the end of Biden's term, it was 6 trillion. And so essentially, in 4 years, federal spending rose 50%.
Yep.
That is just insane, and we all experienced the massive inflation in by beginning in 22, I think, when gas was $5 a gallon, uh, and then we went to they just increased everything. It was unaffordable, and then the property tax revaluation of
The
2023.
property tax revaluation. I want to come back to that when we come back on the other side of the break. Remember, you can call in and join this conversation at 440-946-9468. You're listening to Voice of Geauga with me, Jonathan Broadbent, your host. Skip Claypool is away. He had a meeting this morning, and we have guest Mark Zetzer returning to Voice of Geauga. This is a critical topic that a lot of people are very curious about right now. Join the conversation. We'll come back with more on the other side of the break. All right, we're out. So if you still hear us, that means you are listening to the podcast. This is the Voice of Geauga. We are both radio show and podcast. So right now we're on commercial break on the radio. That'll just be about 2 minutes, Mark, and we'll come back on air on the radio. This gives us a chance to take a little break here. I am looking at, you know what I'm going to do, just because I thought that was such a great comment. I'm taking a look here. Let's see, Zetzer, Mark Zetzer. There's that great picture of you with the flag in the background. Love it.
Thank you.
So let's see. I think that I can look at your activity on Voice of Geauga. Maybe, if I can figure out how to do it.
The lead of the comment is, here's a topic for your show. In our 250th year, United States citizens are besieged by much, and then it just truncates my activity. I can't read the whole post.
That is so strange. Let's see, check-ins, sports, movies, TV shows, books. Wow, I've got a whole bunch on your profile. Darn, when I go to your profile, it actually just shows the posts that you've made. You've made some really interesting posts, and about Shaker Heights. I'll keep digging. If I'm able to find it, I will read that on air.
Well, that's how I got my start in politics, was organizing against tax levies in Shaker
We need
Heights.
more people doing that. They just continue. It's like a boa constrictor. The taxes continue.
Which was what my argument in the post was. Why are we paying taxes?
Oh, we're back from break. Welcome back to Voice of Geauga with Jonathan Broadbent and returning guest Mark Zetzer. We are on air again on WINT Radio. After taking a little break to work on the podcast side, we had a few weeks there. We made some refinements. I hope you enjoy those. That's your cue, by the way, listening audience. Feedback welcome. We hope that you are enjoying the Voice of Geauga podcast. It's now on Facebook, Rumble, and YouTube. We are making some moves to add Voice of Geauga to some other platforms. I get feedback regularly from people, and it seems that people have their own personal preferences as to which social media platforms they like. I've grown to be a big fan, for instance, of Substack. We may be adding Voice of Geauga to more of these platforms, so stay tuned. For the time being, we are on WINT, that's Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., on WINT Radio, that's 101.5 FM, 1330 AM. You can also stream that audio only from the radio station at wintradio.com or visit voiceofgeauga.com. You can stream the audio. We, of course, want to grow the podcast because we find that the conversation that takes place is very robust. It gives people an opportunity to join in and collaborate on finding answers. For instance, Mark, we've got Nana Sherrill here, who, in response to young adults and actual American currency, made the comment, kids can't even identify nickels, dimes, etc. They don't even know how to hand back change. Maybe they stopped teaching these things. Could be the setup for a cashless society, which, oh boy, get me started on CBDC, which stands for Centralized Banking Digital Currency. That is a nightmare in the making. We need to avoid that.
But yeah, do you remember perhaps Jonathan when and I worked retail and we had to count back change. We had to count back, subtract from what they gave us, and count back so that we completed, and we'd have to end with the amount that they gave us. This is how you return change.
Yeah.
And nobody does. If you ever use cash, and I don't even use cash that much anymore. So I think it's so convenient not to. But if you ever do, a young person will just grab a wad of cash and a wad of bills and put it in your hand, and they don't count it back. And how do you know if it was correct? Of course, the register tells them how much, but they fumble with it, and it is kind of annoying. And now we have the pennies, which are effectively worthless, and you got to fiddle with those. But that's again the part of inflation, what it does to the currency. It's not real. It's not real money. Hasn't been since 1964. The coins were solid. Pennies were solid copper. The coins were solid silver. A dime was 1/10 of an ounce of silver. A quarter was a quarter of an ounce of silver. When I had a birthday, my great grandfather gave me a silver dollar. This was in the late 1960s, and it was solid silver. And he told me that. He said, because by then, if you had a 1968 edition of the silver dollar, it was no longer silver. But he had one that was a 1963 edition, because that was the year I was born. And he said, "This is solid silver." And he was trying to teach me, like he knew what was happening.
Yeah.
And he was by that time, he was already in his 80s. But it was real money. And paper money was a note. Your dollar bill was a note that you could return it to a bank and get back silver for it. Most of the currency in America was based on silver, although we talk about the gold standard. Only higher bills were based, you could turn it in for gold, for instance. And the federal government and the Federal Reserve Bank defaulted in 1971. Very famous act of Republican President Nixon, who was widely popular. He won huge election victory. And he was the one who said, we have to go off the gold standard. And that initiated massive inflation in the 1970s.
A terrible idea.
But they defaulted. The foreign banks wanted their gold, and they didn't have it in Fort Knox or wherever they keep it. They didn't have enough.
Well, I think there's a lot to unpack with gold and how much actually exists and what resides in various places like Fort Knox. I want to interject the suggestion to our listening audience. It's a fewfold. One is be aware if you go into a local business, and I keep encouraging everybody to be aware of frequent and go to local businesses as often as possible.
Mhm.
And periodically during the course of this show, we spotlight and talk about local, small, mom and pop area businesses. If you can spend cash there, just know this, they keep more of the money. They're not taking a haircut, they're not losing on credit card processing fees if you go in and spend cash. And that gives me an opportunity to shout out a couple of more names of companies that were supportive of our fundraiser a couple of Wednesdays ago. If you go into Hamden Supply or Geauga Auto Parts, I'm encouraging people to go, please go with cash. I'm hopeful that the people working behind the register will recognize and be thankful for that effort on your part, or that move, I should say, on your part. When you spend cash, 100% of the transaction stays with that local small business. Hamden Supply and Geauga Auto Parts were both very supportive of the fundraiser that we had a couple of weeks ago. Thanks again. By the way, if you weren't able to attend, Mark Zetzer was there. Mark came, joined us at the fundraiser,
Very good.
and
Yeah.
joined us on mic for a little bit. Thanks
Uh,
again for
and
coming,
I
Mark.
am also a customer of Hamden Supply, and I would vouch for them because I have 4 acres of riverfront property, and I need a lot of fill dirt right now, and I got a big job coming up. But if anyone is a homeowner and you sometimes you write big checks for big jobs, if you ever talk to contractors, they'll tell you often, what their bid is or what their quote is, and then they'll also might say, hey, well, if you pay cash,
Yep.
this is the cash discount.
Yeah,
So
that's the way that it should be, because
yeah,
they're not losing money on that credit card transaction.
and I always try to do that. Uh,
There was a local garage I was going to for a while that for years had a lower price for cash, and I took advantage of that every time. So I would go in with whatever it is, 4, 5, 600 bucks, and I would probably save 80 or more dollars on the average transaction because it was much less expensive to that business. I don't know exactly what their credit card processing fees were, but I loved it. And they loved it. They keep more money. It's easier. They don't have to deal with the transactions. Setting aside for a moment, I have actually on another show that I do on Unwoke Academy, I've gotten into the credit card processing companies, how much money they have and what they're doing with the money that they're collecting on virtually every transaction across America and the world. So Visa, MasterCard, and other places are getting a little fraction, sometimes as much as 3% on virtually every transaction we do for doing nothing. All it is basically technology facilitating that transaction between the customer and the merchant. So, um, the thing to know is if you can negotiate that cash deal, not only do you often end up, or very frequently end up better off, you spend less money, but also you're not giving money to some very dubious, questionable characters. And yes, I am lumping Visa and MasterCard and American Express, along with others, into that category.
they are
It's
protected as pseudo monopolies,
Yep.
oligopolies, and I think they just have that power to just charge you. And you could even argue that is a form of a tax also because they're so highly regulated and controlled by the government. They're really part of the government.
Yeah. Well, that to a growing extent, that's true of many different entities and organizations. So we've learned recently, unfortunately, of the close collaboration between what are referred to as NGOs or non-governmental organizations, certain nonprofits, all sorts of different entities and organizations are very closely collaborating with government, and that creates not only an atmosphere that can lead to monopolies, but also it can lead to what I refer to as front loading. That's politicians knowing in advance where markets are going and buying things like intellectual property patents, buying stocks in companies, etc.
Dave
Mark, we're coming
Joyce.
up on our middle break. We are, again, I want to put the phone number out there. Dial in 440-946-9468, 440-946-9468 if you'd like to join the conversation. And also, remember, you can join in on social media. Join the conversation. Let's have a robust conversation around taxes, fees, fines, and penalties. We'll come back with more on the other side of the break. And we're out. Yeah, so I know there's a way to do it, Mark. I've got your profile pulled up as a member of or follower of Voice of Geauga, but darn if I'm not figuring out how to view. So wait a minute, can you go back? And again, I just want to emphasize for the listening audience here, we're on break on the radio show, so it may sound a little funny. There may be some pauses here while we try and find some stuff. Prepare content and our thoughts for the second half of the show. Maybe take a couple of sips of our coffee. That what you're seeing is behind the scenes of a radio show.
And I can't. If I click on Voice of Geauga on Facebook, it just starts playing the live stream. Let's see here.
All right, so going back, let me go back to home,
go
and
back
then I'm
to
looking at the Voice of Geauga. So what's the date of that post, and what does it begin with?
It begins with, "Here's a topic for your show." It was dated yesterday.
No, that's your comment. The post itself, because
the post itself, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm just scrolling through the posts, and I've got mine set. That's another confusing issue with Facebook, is how it shows you. Sometimes it will show, what does it call it? It calls them most important or something, and then there's chronological, etc. So I'm scrolling back, and it appears I'm looking at the posts in chronological order that have been made by Voice of Geauga. So going back 23 hours ago, we've got a post pertaining to a Daily Wire article.
you were announcing that you're going back on the radio, WINT.
What is
That
the
was the
post?
post.
What does the post begin with?
It just said Voice of Geauga. The headline was, "We're going back on WINT."
And you say that that's a recent. I'm back to the 6th. Darn. Many of these don't have any comments, or they may have one comment. Geauga, Northeast Ohio, and the world, news and information you can use. We hope to see you Tuesday morning, 7 at 7 a.m. Nope, that we already found that one. And so what's the date of that post, Mark?
I can't find it now. So I've switched profiles. Now I'm looking at my personal.
Oh, okay.
That may have I may have posted it as Mark Zetzer versus Mark Z for Russell B. I'm just trying to find it, but and the gist is what I've been talking about is that why pay taxes? What are we paying taxes for? And if it is a package of services, why are we creating government monopolies to deliver services? Because really, that's not working. It's way too expensive. The standards are substandard, and we don't have choices. And
yeah,
the best way for us to vote is not through democracy, but with our dollars in the marketplace. That's how we vote every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and directly because you're paying a tax for a package of services.
Hold on.
Okay.
Welcome back to Voice of Geauga with your host. That's me, Jonathan Broadbent. Skip Claypool is away this morning. He had a meeting to attend. Joining us again, we have Mark Zetzer, and we have a very robust conversation taking place around taxes, fees, fines, penalties, enrollment, subscription dues, you name it. All the things.
Inflation.
Yeah. All the things that pay government. And there is an argument to be made. In fact, I make it often that it seems to me, the more that we end up paying for a service, the worse it gets. Because this is especially true, and it appears to especially be relevant when we are paying a federal tax and some of those federal dollars come back to the state, and then some of those dollars come back to the county, and then some of those dollars come back to the municipality or township in which you live. So it's a bit like that put out the fire water bucket analogy. Mark, I'm sure you've heard this before. If you line people up, and this used to be the way that people would put out fires, and I think it's an adept analogy. The people would scoop water out of a well or a reservoir or something, and then pass the water from one bucket to the next. And then that person would pass it to the next person in line. And by the time the person standing closest to the fire was ready to throw water onto the fire, you had about 1 or 2 inches of water because a lot of the water gets missed. It's lost in the throwing of it from one bucket into the next. That, unfortunately, is an adept analogy with taxation. When we're sending our tax dollars to federal government, and then you have agencies that siphon some off and then selectively pick and choose who some money is going to come back, not all of it, but some money comes back to a state, and then the state does the same thing, takes a little, siphons some money off, and it's lost into the pockets of various different organizations and entities. And then some little bit of that may come back to your county. And then from there, the county makes decisions about who is in favor and who isn't. And then they hold the purse strings, and some little bit of that goes to your municipality. So that's a big part of how you get to the point where something like filling a pothole is $1.8 million and takes you 4 years to accomplish. That's a broken system, and it's the opposite of what we used to have, right, Mark?
Yes, and we all know we still have a significant portion of our economy that is a free market where you can choose and you pay directly. And that's the key, is that you're paying directly for what you need. And maybe you don't need all these services that the government supposedly is providing and that you're paying for. You should have that choice, because it's to the point now where we're overtaxed and our economy is being strangled to death, especially in the Midwest and what we call the Rust Belt in Ohio. We have to have the ability to choose, um, and I don't want to speak badly about our first responders, but a fire service, and we talked about this in Shaker Heights of all places when I got my start as a tax leader and a taxpayer advocate 14 years ago, is that a fire service is just a service. It doesn't have to be a government agency or a government department. It would be something that you arrange with your insurance company, with your fire insurance company. And to say, if you have you have sprinkler systems, for instance, automatically set up in your house, do you really need to have a fire service? You could opt out of a fire service, but if you didn't, you could have a subscription. And it's same with security, with policing. Many people with means have private security, or they have electronic security,
Yeah.
and they don't need police, for instance, or you're carrying a weapon, you're carrying a firearm to protect yourself. Because ultimately, are the police going to be there when you really need them? Probably not. And you should be able to choose, is what I'm saying, if you
Mark,
want to subscribe to a service.
Mark, I can sense the outrage of the left. The leftists hearing a comment like that, I mean, this violates what has become almost a religion, or actually, I think it kind of is a religion to the left. This belief that if only there were enough money, the government could solve everything, and government can provide for every need and every service. Clearly, in my book, and anybody willing to look at the facts and figures can tell that that is the opposite of true.
Yes.
Not only historically, looking worldwide at the number of people who have died of mass starvation, waiting for government to finally show up one day and say, aha, we've arrived. We now have enough money, and now the great, gracious, utopian future awaits you. That never happens. But we do find that once you get to outrageous fees and sums, and it to me it's mystifying and it bothers me that we have gotten to the point where we've become accustomed to vastly overpaying for everything. We're finding out now that some of the avenues of waste, fraud, and abuse, and the taxpayer is balking. Finally, I hope it's enough people to actually move the needle. And there is this big movement to abolish property taxes. And hopefully that gains more traction and gets done. But we have to do something. Somebody showed me an image yesterday, Mark, and I'd like your feedback on this, that shows current, as of the last week, all of the sheriff's auctions, the property auctions taking place in Ohio for people that are losing their properties. They're losing their
Oh my
homes.
gosh.
It's an unbelievable number of dots all over Ohio. So the argument that if only there were another $20 billion added onto our already egregious and overstuffed budget, that maybe then we would have, what do they call it on the left? We'd have justice. Uh, it's wildly untrue, and all it does is create an unsustainable denial of future.
Well, I think the property tax issue is what started this this conversation in the last year or so, as we've been gathering these signatures,
Yep.
where we've said, okay, why, we have to abolish it. And then people are like, well, what do we replace it with? Well, what is it for? What are we paying for? And most people think of the property tax as a school tax. For instance, it basically goes to the county, and it covers the county school districts. And we all understand that education is very important, but the cost of education is skyrocketing, and schools have become educate. We've had a revolution. Let's face it. We've had a revolution in the internet, and now AI. And it gets widely, uh, touted and pushed as this incredible invention, and it is. But where are the savings? If this is such a great invention, and the internet has completely changed our lives, that's the biggest invention in my lifetime, and it's driven down costs immensely, and mainly because it's information. It's making information so much easier to obtain, and it really affects everything that we do. It makes everything cheaper. It should be making everything cheaper, but of course, government makes everything more expensive as that's happening.
Yep.
So education is where we really need market innovations. And whether it's formal education or informal education, the government should not be involved in this service at all. The state of Ohio should not be controlling our education and controlling our curriculum. And this is all about parents and students. These are the consumers of education, and we should be deciding this. And some of the innovation will occur, of course, in private schools and elite schools. And if you look up, there's a new school network going across the country called the Alpha School. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's basically an AI driven. They don't even have teachers; they have coaches, or what I don't know what they're called. I think they're called coaches. And the child creates their own teacher, an AI construct, and they can create multiple teachers for different subjects. So they can cover their state mandated curriculum in half a day and half of a school day. And then the other half of the school day, they go out and do things. They build things. They learn skills, hands on, athletics, and these kids love these schools But of course, only the very elite kids can afford it. This is the alpha school. Now, this is an innovation that should be available to everybody.
I'm
And
not sure I'm not sure I'm excited about the, AI component of that. There are schools that are doing similar things, and actually this is an opportune moment to reference teaching our traditions. The folks that run that's based out of Chesterland, are doing they're incorporating some interesting activities with the educational process. So it's not just kids trapped in a desk for 8 hours a day being lectured to, but kids actually being involved in interaction, etc. And there's a growing trend in that direction to bring back activity, and there is a growing trend, and I happen to admire it, of reducing screen time. Mark, I'm going to share a screen here. I do this frequently on this show. This is a screen from the Ohio Department of Education. I picked Wycliffe City Schools because they are a good representative example. I've used this a number of times on the show, but to me, this is an example of how we get to government. Uh, I don't know the best word to use here, but this is
waste,
uh,
fraud, and abuse.
well, I started to say waste, fraud, and abuse, but it's an unfortunate dynamic, and I want to be clear about where we're headed in this conversation. It's not my intention. It's not the intention of Voice of Geauga to paint with a broad brush and say that everybody's bad and all government is bad and that everybody in these organizations is somehow some sort of bad actor or a bad player. That's not the case. In fact, you have many, many people in your local school district, and certainly police, fire, EMS, who are wonderful people who work hard and do well, and they do a great job. Above them, in the bureaucratic bloat and outside of their control,
Mm.
there is waste, fraud, and abuse. It can be too easy, and it's a shortcut in our brains to try and lump everybody together and just paint with a broad brush and say they're all bad. That is not true. We have in local government at the county level and on various boards throughout Geauga County and Lake County and police, fire, and EMS. I know many of them personally. We have some very, very good people who do a good job, an honest, hardworking job for a reasonable salary. We also have people in that system who are wasteful and they are abusing the system. There are people who are getting salaries for doing next to nothing. We have huge overhead, and you can see it. I'm still looking at this page, Mark, from Wycliffe. The
A lot
years
of big
of just
numbers.
what's that?
Those are a lot of big numbers.
Yeah, there's a lot of huge numbers, and I took the time a couple of months ago to do a calculation. Lake County in total spent a little over $550 million in a year on their various school districts, and somewhere I've got a rough sketch of what Geauga County looks like as well. But a lot of this is just carry forward expenses. And I've used the analogy before. This is a little bit off topic, but it relates to how we manage budgets and how we manage our resources. The analogy that I use is, imagine that you have some job somewhere and you're getting paid $70,000 a year. If one year you suddenly get unique circumstance and you're given a bonus, they excuse me one second. I am just keeping an eye on our break. Not seeing it yet, but just know that we will be coming up on a break here shortly. Oh, okay. We had a minor issue with the break there. I'm waiting for a cue from our group. Okay, we're just going to keep rolling with this, Mark. The issue is, here's the analogy that I use. Imagine you're getting $70,000 a year,
Mhm.
and one year there's a unique circumstance and you get $100,000 income. If you go that year blowing all that money and signing up for long-term subscriptions. You sign up for a whole bunch more streaming services. You join a 3-year membership at the gym. You sign up for a lease on a fancy high-end car or something. Then suddenly you're trapped. You're trapped in this environment where you've overcommitted, and then it makes it impossible to come back and right size your expenses. To and a bigger scale, school districts and a lot of government agencies have operated in the same way. My reason for pointing all of that out is I'm trying to belay that instinct that a lot of people have to um, to just cast a wide net and accuse that school district of waste, fraud, and abuse, or that government agency. Some of them are trapped by commitments that were made prior to their administration.
Right, and it's a system, and I certainly wouldn't say people are inherently bad in the public sector at all. I, however, have worked in the private sector, and I know many people. All my life, I've worked in the private sector, and the people are good too. They're hardworking and they're honest. But you know what? If we are not profitable, if we are not cost effective, we get fired. We get laid off,
Yeah. Yep.
and it doesn't mean we're bad people. It just means that's the market working. And I don't, you say it's impossible to cut in a school budget. No, it isn't. You have to cut. They're the servants. They need to cut staff. They need to cut benefits. They need to cut salaries to regular levels, or just privatize the whole service. And then the good professionals in education, the great teachers, can actually they can benefit. They can have better careers, more money, and be rewarded directly for their services. And so I'm not. Yeah, it's a system, but we have to change it. It's collapsing. You're draining the lifeblood out of our county, out of our country. This economy is most of my adult life. I have seen the American economy has been a disaster. I've had,
And they go ahead, Mark.
I would say in the mid to late 1990s, and then a few years in Trump's first presidency are the only times in my life, and I'm 63, where I felt I was able to keep up or maybe even exceed the level of inflation and living costs. That's it.
Again, my instinct here is to try to keep the conversation accessible to most by using analogies. And hopefully the analogies work. And I think that it's easiest, perhaps, for people to get their heads around school budget and what we're spending on schools. And in the context of property taxes, we know it's called a property tax. People consider it a school tax for a reason. Around 60% on average of our property taxes go to pay for local schools. I think we need to clearly do a better job of reassessing how we approach education. And I've used I've referenced many times the average cost per pupil around the world. And in other developed nations, the cost averages around $10,000 to $12,000 on
Wow,
average.
that's a bargain.
It's a great bargain. So that's your cost per pupil. And in the US, and especially here locally in the state of Ohio, we have some school districts that are 25, 30, and even over $40,000 per pupil expense. But we're ending up with worse results. And there are places in the world that are, and I use this reference often, they're little more than a mud hut with a chalkboard that are doing a better job, which brings us to one of the key culprits. There are many. When you get into the cost, the expense of ed tech, that's education technology, when you get into the cost of all of these consultants and advisors and third-party groups and the administrative bloat, those certainly add as well. But construction, all of the parade of endless construction that constantly seems to be taking place, my mind immediately goes back to the mob era. And mob was always involved in construction because it's an easy way to hide money. If it is the case, and certainly at a minimum, it's the case that we have school districts that are not doing well at their one job, which is to educate children and prepare them for life with adequate life skills. But they are building and then rebuilding and then revamping and then remodeling these Taj Mahal schools at $400-500 million, and they're attaching bonds that go 15, 20 years plus that are requiring huge interest payments. And that's where a lot of this comes from. So somehow, some way, we have to break this cycle and get back to education and try and create a clear path for people not to be crushed by debilitating taxation.
Well, you and I, Jonathan, as the consumers of education, why are we concerned about the cost of construction? Are you concerned about the cost of the construction of Giant Eagle, for instance, new store? No, you go there and you shop, you get what you need. In the marketplace, their job is to worry about the facility, and because we don't have the time and energy to go into the minutia of all these costs in a
Mhm.
in the school board that brings up, and uh, the meetings in the county and the township. That's why you as a free person can decide in the marketplace what services you want to buy, and only what services that you get, not how they were delivered. That's beyond our scope, and that's beyond our we shouldn't have to worry about that.
Right.
We don't care how it's delivered. You just want to know what the price is, what the quality is, what the content is. That's it. Because we're busy. We have lives. We have families. We have homes. We can't worry ourselves with that. And by capturing all these industries and moving them in the public sector, and you can, of course, you can petition your school board when you're worried about the costs of the new gym. We don't have time for that. Most people don't, and you shouldn't. You just go directly to, I like that school. I want to go to that school, or I'm going to homeschool my kids. But then for sports, we're going to use the facility that's already been built, or there's multiple facilities. Some facilities, I know, as a parent of a travel baseball league player, there's privately built baseball diamonds in the region that you can go to. And you pay a small fee when you go in, and they're great. They're beautiful. They have PA systems, and they're so much better than a school baseball diamond.
Yeah, more of it should be private in my book. And we're seeing some collaboration between local businesses helping to support, but ultimately, I'm not so sure that that's entirely a good thing because it takes some of the financial burden off of the school district, which allows the school district to then raise
Spend
prices and
more.
costs elsewhere, add more on elsewhere. And we're seeing many examples of that in places like Wickliffe. There's some great comments that I'm seeing here from people in Lake County referencing Wickliffe in particular. They're not the only one. I've just picked them because they were front of mind. We are coming up on the conclusion of the show. Mark Zetzer, I want to thank you for coming back on Voice of Geauga, sharing your perspective on taxation. I encourage everybody out there, be aware of what we're getting in return for what we're spending. More people, I suggest, should be at least marginally aware of the cost relative to what we're getting in return. Are these, for instance, basically empty grocery store shelves in a really beautiful looking grocery stores, to use Mark Zetzer's analogy? I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Don't forget to mark your calendar for tomorrow morning. We have K. Carl Smith returning, or excuse me, first time guest, K. Carl Smith. And on Friday, we're going to be talking about smart meters on Voice of Geauga. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And don't forget to click that like button and share on social media, Facebook, Rumble, and YouTube. Those clicks on the like button, they help. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, we're out. Yeah, well, I learned something new here. I have to manually scroll. Okay.
Did we miss a commercial break?